Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. I'm your host, Shireen Benzayed. I'm Head of Innovation at Finastra, and this is one of the live meetups we are conducting during our hackathon, Hack to the Future. This is our third Hack to the Future Global Fintech Hackathon, this time organized in honor of the International Women's Day, and aiming to build an unbiased fintech future. You've got till the 4th of April to join and submit a project. And for more information, you can check iwd.devpost.com. Today, we'll be discussing a topic that I'm really passionate about. This is about diversity and inclusion in fintech. As you might know, women represent about a third of the workforce within the financial services industry, but only 9% of fintech founders or co-founders are women. And today, we're really lucky to be hosting two amazing and inspiring fintech CEOs. Both are actually part of the WILLA program, which we are very proud to sponsor and support here at Finastra. WILLA is actually a diversity accelerator that has been supporting female startup founders for more than 15 years across industries. They have supported and helped about 650 startups, and they have an alumni network of about 1,200 CEOs. What's also really interesting is that 85% of startups that they have incubated are still operating after 3 years. WILLA, though they actually operate across industries, they actually have a Women in Fintech incubation program that focuses on supporting female fintech founders and CEOs. And today we'll be hearing from two fintech CEOs from the 2020 Women in Fintech program, as they will be sharing their background, experience, and much more. And with this, I'd like to welcome our panelists, Ambre Soubiran and Tiphaine Saltini. Ambre, do you want to start and tell us a bit more about you and about KAIKO?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks a lot, Shireen, for having us over. And so my name is Ambre Soubiran. I'm French, and I'm the CEO of a company called KAIKO, which is a market data provider for crypto assets. So we work within the blockchain space, and we provide access to financial data around crypto assets. And just one word about my background. Before that, I was working as a banker. I was an equity derivative structurer for HSBC for about 10 years based in London. And I initially got personally very interested in crypto in the early days of crypto back in 2013. And a couple of years later, I left the bank to pivot my life to full-time crypto.
Shireen, I think
you're sorry. Thanks a lot, It was, it's really exciting to have you with us. Next we have Tiphaine. Do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about Neuroprofiler as well?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Tiphaine Saltini. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Neuroprofiler. I've been passionate about behavioral finance since high school. I did a PhD in behavioral finance when I was working in private banking. And I decided to create Neuroprofiler with my co-founder, who is an expert in machine learning and quantitative finance. So Neuroprofiler today is a tool to assess investment preferences through behavioral finance and gamification in line with the financial regulations. And we sell these products to private banks, retail banks, asset management companies, and other fintechs like crowdfunding platforms and robo-advisors.
Thanks a lot, Tiphaine. So this session is really exciting because it's not only about leadership in fintech, amazing and inspiring female fintech CEOs, but it's also about the latest innovations here in the fintech space with the crypto space, blockchain, and also behavioral finance and AI and machine learning. So thank you so much, both of you, for being with us today. I just wanted to mention for everyone watching us, both on whether you are on LinkedIn Live or YouTube Live, you can post your questions on the chat, and we'll be happy to take them with our panelists at the end of the session. Now, as we get started, I have a question for both of you, actually. So you're both fintech CEOs, and we would always wonder, especially for fintech startups, what does your role really encompass? Maybe what's a typical day look like, and what responsibilities do you need to manage? Ambre, do you want to start?
Yeah, happy to start. I'd say, and I guess this will change over time and over the growth and maturity of the startup. KAIKO is just approaching now the Series A stage, so we've reached our product market fit, but it's still, we're still not a 100% consolidated company. We're still building very much of it. So I would say in the early days, it was very much doing a bit of everything and trying to get the right people on board. I've taken an approach in the past of hiring people that I thought were brilliant rather than hiring skills. It was more about people and really making sure that I got the best team, and then everybody kind of was very much hands-on and doing a bit of everything. So from my perspective, it's team and people management. It's clients, obviously, because when you start the first couple of years, you don't really have a sales organization. It's very much founder-led sales, so very much involved in sales still, and involved a lot in getting the name of the brand out there. So a lot of public speaking, a lot of conferences, a lot of, at a time pre-COVID, I was really doing a lot of traveling and conferences and trying to meet and network. I don't really like this word. It has a bit of a negative connotation, but network as in get really the name out there. So that's the majority of the day-to-day of a CEO from my perspective. And then obviously on the more regular but infrequent timing, then there's the fundraising considerations. So I closed a seed round about 2 years ago, and now I'm currently fundraising for our A round. So this is obviously a big part of the role of the CEO, is making sure the company never runs out of cash, and that you can hire the right people, but also incentivize them and are able to provide them with a kind of stable perspectives, basically, on how from a financial standpoint the company will survive. So that's kind of I guess the main responsibilities I'm handling.
Yeah, thank you. Tiphaine, anything different there, or would you agree? How are things on your side?
Yeah. I think it's really similar to Ambre. So when you have an early stage company and you as the CEO, you have to to do a little bit of everything at the beginning. The difference with Neuroprofiler, I think, is that I started the company focusing a lot on the product because it was the output of my PhD thesis. So at the beginning, I worked a lot on the algorithm with my co-founder, on the product, on the user interface, and then a lot on the business development side. And now I think after 4 years, we are a little bit in between. So I would say 60-70% of my time is dedicated to business development, and the rest to product management, administration, fundraising, and team management.
No, thank you. That's actually interesting. So it's a mix of building, managing the team, focusing on clients and business development, and then on the other hand, you're the face of the company. So you're presenting it, and you of course need to make sure that it doesn't run out of cash. Tiphaine, as you mentioned, how you've started your company with Neuroprofiler, can you maybe elaborate a bit on that and tell us maybe a bit more about your background and journey? How did you get to start the company? How did you found your co-founders, and how did it all go?
So as I mentioned, I've been passionate about behavioral economics since high school. So I wanted to work in this area. And I think I want to also be an entrepreneur or to have my own business. So for me, the creation of Neuroprofiler was quite obvious because I wanted to have this entrepreneurial experience plus cognitive science, behavioral economics. And when I was working in private banking, I realized that the way financial advisors were assessing the investment profile of their clients could be improved by behavioral finance. And on top of that, the European regulator recommended to use behavioral finance to assess investment profiles. So for me, it was a great opportunity to start. And finding a co-founder was really a challenge. I spent more than almost 1 year to find a co-founder. So I participated to a lot of conferences, meetings, meetups to find a co-founder. At that time, I was in Hong Kong. So it was even more complicated because in Hong Kong, it's very hard to find someone who wants to start a startup because it's not in the culture. And especially I wanted someone with good skills in IT, in quantitative finance, in machine learning. So it was almost impossible. And really by chance, I ran a marathon in France during my holidays, and I met my co-founder during this marathon. So nothing to do with business events, and I was exactly the perfect guy in terms of skills. At that time, he was working in a hedge fund, so it was another challenge to convince him to quit this very comfortable job to join Neuroprofiler. But after 6 months, we finally managed to convince him, and I'm very happy now to work with him in Neuroprofiler.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Amazing story. And then I guess that's where you decided to move back to France, or have you started it also as like a Hong Kong, French?
That's a good question, because at the beginning, my plan was not to come back to France and not to come back to Europe, actually, because I was quite happy in Hong Kong. But finally, I realized that France was a very nice country to start a company, because in terms of support from the government, from the BPI, so the French investment bank, it's you have a lot of support and helps, a lot of acceleration programs, incubation programs. So at the beginning, I wanted to start in Hong Kong. Then I look at Singapore, Luxembourg, Switzerland, the US, France, and in the end, France was the most interesting place to start the company from a financial point of view.
Cool, thank you. Ambre, I know your story is a bit different. Can you share with us a bit more about that, how you've joined KAIKO and your journey till you got there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a different background than Tiphaine, but I'm a mathematician by training. That's what I studied in university. And I started working in financial markets because I thought that's where, within the realms of finance, there would be the most creativity. I went into the derivatives world, which was honestly really, really cool and exciting. But I was always, I think, very much interested with more on the edge math research that was tied to money and the notion of money. That's really part of my not just investment thesis, also personal thesis of where I see growth. And so I was generally just reading things, and I stumbled upon the Bitcoin white paper, which was really the foundational paper that introduced the theory behind Bitcoin. And Bitcoin, as you know, is an asset that lives on the blockchain and that exists through the establishment of a new technology called blockchain. And so I got really interested initially when I read that, and I started going to meetups, but this was really the early days. It was very underground in London. But I think it was interesting because there's this notion, which is, I think, bigger than Bitcoin, of the possibility to create what's called the digital scarcity. That's really what blockchain enables, right? So blockchain as a technology enables the fact that if I have a digital asset and I send it to you, I don't have it anymore, which was a very hard problem to solve for, just because in the digital world, when I have a spreadsheet, for example, and I send you a spreadsheet, I can send it to 27 different people and I can still have the spreadsheet, right? There's not this notion of like getting rid of something physically. And so that's what blockchain solves. It's creating a world where you can have digital scarcity, and thereby you can have money, because if money is not scarce, it loses its function as a money, right? So that I got really interested in this narrative, the really like economics, computer science narrative of scarcity. And I started talking a lot of blockchain and thereby Bitcoin at HSBC. At a time where it was 2013, 2014, it was a bit too early. I think nobody really wanted to hear about that. And there was this really strong idea that Bitcoin was, the drug money and the terrorist money, and there was another narrative. This is completely antiquated today, but back then it was still very much the impression people had. And so I didn't really succeed back then to get HSBC's attention or excitement around that, which understandably it was a bit early. But I got to meet an incredible entrepreneur called Pascal, who is the original founder of KAIKO. So I met him in 2014 when he was starting the company, and he wanted my advice on how to sell the data to banks. And he was right. I mean, today we are selling data to banks, but it took 7 more years. So he was a bit early on his time, but we got along really well. And down the road in late 2016, early 2017, Pascal got offered the job as a CEO of a very big crypto startup called Ledger. And so he basically joined Ledger and was looking to sell down KAIKO. And I stepped up at this point and I acquired the company from him and relaunched it. So it was very much an opportunistic move. I don't know if I would have had, what it took back then in such an early market to drop everything for that. But what I acquired was really the brand and the historical data and the technology. And so it was a great opportunity for me to finally move out of banking and move full-time to crypto. There was no team when I acquired the company. It was just the tech and the brand. And so we've hired a new team from then and then raised capital over time. And that's how I kind of got into that. It was a very organic thing.
No, that's a really interesting story. Quite different, actually, from the traditional or usual fintech founder stories. Do you want to maybe a question I had is were you considering at the time creating your own startup or in the crypto space as well?
So back then, just before between HSBC and before really moving full time to KAIKO, I was starting. I was basically trying to raise a fund to invest in crypto assets and blockchain companies. So I was involved in the early steps of structuring a fund, which is really the legal part and the structuring part. So I hadn't started raising yet or deploying, but that's really how I reconnected with Pascal at that point. Is I wanted KAIKO to be one of my first investments. This is how much I believed in the company. And then Pascal was like, well, actually, rather than investing in KAIKO, how about you just take it over? And that's how it happens. But yes, before I wanted to raise a fund, which was not like starting a company, right? It was more on the investment side. But I was already thinking about leaving.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's still starting it not from scratch, but almost as you had to build a team and get everything from the ground up. Yeah, that's really interesting. And my next question is actually more about the team. Tiphaine, you shared with us how you've found or how you met your co-founder. My question is more on the skills that you were both looking for in your co-founder, for Tiphaine and more maybe on the wider team as you've built it when acquiring and stepping in as the CEO of KAIKO. Tiphaine, do you want to start on this one?
Yeah, sure. So what kind of skills I was looking in my co-founder, you mean?
Exactly, yeah. You mentioned earlier a bunch of technical skills. What I would be also interested in is also, soft skills and other things you were particularly looking for.
Yeah. No, it was interesting because that's when I was in Hong Kong looking for a co-founder, I met a lot of investors and they all told me, well, you cannot build this company alone. You need a co-founder. Otherwise, you won't be able to find investors, and that's how it works. And yeah, we cannot do it alone. So for me, it was really a necessity because of that. So I was looking for someone with this technical skills in machine learning and quantitative finance, but of course personality is also extremely important. At that time, investors told me, "Well, you see, if Neuroprofiler is successful, basically it will be like a wedding contract with your co-founder, because you have to plan everything in the shareholder agreements. It may last long, it may be a long-term relationship. So of course, personality is extremely important, and not only skills. That's why at the beginning, basically, where we were with Julian, we spent a lot of time together. We worked also remotely. We went on holidays together to feel really if we had the compatible personalities, and I think this period was extremely useful for us to know each other better, and also to see that we were able to work together in the long term. And then we had also the same projects, because I can see co-founders, for instance, who are not aligned in terms of projects. Some of them, they want to have sell the company in 3 years. Others, they want to have more like a profitable companies in the long term. So it was very important at the beginning to spend time together to check that we were aligned in terms of projects and ways of working.
Oh, thank you. And what about you, as you've recruited for this very first team for KAIKO? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. So it was very opportunistic. It's really really smart people that I've met along the way, with whom I knew I could work and I would be happy to see their faces in the morning. And I think that's really was the let's say the must-have, not necessarily didn't do all, but at least that was a really strong prerequisite. I think is a combination of intelligence and also emotional intelligence. The team is very much open-minded, and there's a lot of kindness is not the good word because it sounds soft, but there's a lot of goodwill, I would say, within the company. That's super important. Obviously, they're all super smart, and I think I trust them, which is incredibly important. But that was really in the early days. Those were the most important features. Now that we're going to probably double the size of the team between now and the end of the year. We're announcing actually at 3 p.m. at the end of this call, we're announcing 12 new job postings across the board, both in like legal counsel, sales, engineering, really different types of jobs. And so now for the first time, actually not really, but we're really starting to hire for skills, because we realize now we need not just people, but actual, like hardcore experience to be able to implement. The first time that I've started really hiring for specific skills was starting from last fall. We've hired 2 senior experienced people that came from 10 years of a different background that brought that experience to the company. But yeah, the most important for me is like great human beings, great smart human beings. And kind of then once this is validated, then we look for skills. But skills without the emotional intelligence doesn't really work with me.
No, thank you. That's really interesting. It's a great announcement. Do you want to share more, maybe about those openings that you?
Thanks for the opportunity to advertise for that. I guess everything will be posted this afternoon on kaiko.com/jobs, and we are looking for pretty much in product, in sales, in growth, in engineering. We're looking really for quite a bunch of people and profile. Most people would be located in Paris. where we have really awesome offices, by the way. It's part of the perks. And we're also looking for a couple of positions in New York. And we're open to remote. We prefer people to be in the office just because, as I mentioned, we're a relatively close, happy team, and we like to meet in person, but it's not impossible to be remote either.
No, thanks a lot for sharing. I think it's a very exciting opportunity. Definitely for anyone interested in crypto, and just to mention to our audience that, again, you're one of the largest players actually when it comes to data, crypto-related data. So it's definitely a very exciting opportunity, and I would encourage everyone to go and check it after the session, and also to apply if you're interested. Ambre, I had another question actually for you about the team. You mentioned how you bought the company back then from Pascal, who's now the CEO of Ledger. Is he still involved in the work at KAIKO?
Absolutely. He's a minority shareholder now, but he's still involved, and he also sits at the board, which is great because on my board, it's myself, our two investor leads for the seed round, and Pascal, and he brings a lot of the more entrepreneurial experience. He's scaled a couple of businesses, he IPO'd already. He has this kind of entrepreneurship vision that is very complementary to the vision that VCs bring to the table.
Oh, cool. Thank you. My next set of questions to both of you is more about specific experiences, whether they are positive or negative ones, any challenges that you've met, what you've learned from them, or maybe another way to put this is, can you think of a time where something went wrong, and what did you learn from it? Maybe starting again with you, Tiphaine.
Yeah, sure. So I think on our side, what was very difficult is at the beginning when you have a very limited amount of money. So basically, my savings and the savings of my co-founder and some support from the government to allocate this money smartly. We decided to spend a lot of money on business development, and now it's we see the good consequences of the investments because our company is known in France, in Luxembourg, in Switzerland, but I think we didn't spend enough money on the product. So that was one feedback for future entrepreneurs, and because in terms of skills, we were very good regarding the algorithm with my co-founder and myself. Also, of course, for the business development, because it was one of my skills too. But on the product itself, the user interface, it was not the skill of my co-founder and not my skill. So we didn't spend enough time on this on this part. And we realized that we lost time because at the beginning we started with a very simple product, and we didn't give a nice impression of our product because of that. I know it's much more better, and it's even one of our key added value to have a very gamified and smooth user interface.
And a question there, Tiphaine. When did you realize that you needed really to invest much more on the user interface?
That's a very good question. It was very complicated because our contacts in banks were on average smart people, so as they understood our algorithm and how our product was different and super relevant for the activity. But we had difficulties during pilots when our product was confronting to end clients, so users, also clients of a retail bank or private banks. And I think we realized the issue after 2 or 3 pilots, because the satisfaction rate was not as high as expected, and our direct contact were not aware of that too, because for them the product was just perfect, super smart. So we needed at least one year to realize that we had really an issue, and that we had actually to raise much more money to be able to address this issue. And this is what we did.
Oh, thank you for sharing. That's really interesting, actually. You've sort of started solving for the most difficult part, which is the model, and then, yeah, it's just with sort of end users' feedback that we realize how important user interface can be.
Yeah, no, I think we had this scientific bias, my co-founder and I, and focusing a lot on the algorithm, on the nice model, and on the predictability of the model, but not enough on the end users. And
and you definitely got lucky also with having the same bias with your counterparts on the bank side. So that's probably a good point. Oh, do you want to share with us some of these times where either something positive or challenging happened to you, what you've learned from it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's one really major thing is that we pivoted on our business model at the seed round stage. So when I acquired the business, it was a data store model, meaning that users were able to get on a website and do their own data shopping. They could say, okay, I want this instrument and this year of data, etc. And then they would pay and they would receive a download link to get basically what would be similar to a spreadsheet, like an Excel spreadsheet with a bunch of data inside. And that was great because that was an enabler when we started and we needed to start making money. So we went all the way to $1 million in revenue in the early days, but we were just selling data. And so we didn't have control over what people did with the data after, or any visibility on recurring businesses, because we were just, a bit at the mercy of people kind of changing their mind and not buying again the next month. And so one of the commitments during the seed round was our pivot to a SaaS model, which was only selling licenses that gave people access to a platform that had the data inside, pretty much. And so it was really a very important shift in the business model. And it was one that was absolutely necessary in order to create value for the company and having those recurring revenues. So we've completely pivoted away, but it meant at a point where we had revenue and we were not very far from profitability, it meant going back to zero revenue and building again an entire client base around a model that was different. And so convincing a client, especially in the crypto space where people are very short-termist, trying to tell them you're going to subscribe for a year was something that was not an easy switch, and that we've fully done now. 100% of our revenue are on SaaS. We've reached all of our kind of revenue targets, etc. So it's great, but it was a stressful and kind of difficult moment, a couple few months, that also made all the conversations difficult when you found your sales model and you know that this sales model work, and then you actually have to quote unquote disappoint clients to then tell them, actually now we don't sell data anymore, actually you have to subscribe, and we only do annual licenses now. It's kind of a hard of a breaking change in your business model. So yeah,
and absolutely a great move for the company. How did you realize that you had to do that pivot?
It was I realized it before, when I was fundraising, when I was looking for capital. Is basically that's obvious that it's the only way to protect your data also and your rights on the data. So if you look at all the traditional financial data providers, everybody has this kind of model and nobody's just sells data, right? So we knew that this was going to be something we would have to do at some point, but that had also technical implications, because in order to sell licenses and SaaS, you basically need to also have the real-time capabilities. You need to have a different type of technology in order to create the value that enables you to lock those clients. So it was something we knew we would have to do. It was a hard commitment towards investors when we raised the seed round, and it was also kind of basically requiring a bunch of changes on the infrastructure side as well, which were also delivered at the time of the seed. So yeah, everything happened at the same time, but we knew it would happen at some point.
Yeah, makes lots of sense. Another question actually I have for you, given you're mentioning different business models. and we've been discussing UI with Tiphaine. Haven't you ever got this temptation to sort of build for a UI as well, in addition to the subscription to the data, something similar to what traditional market data providers would give to their users? You know, the icon portal or the Bloomberg portal.
Sorry, this is a question. Sorry. I completely sorry. I froze for 5 seconds. You mean, do we have a portal?
My question is actually, so you mentioned how you pivoted your business model, and my question, as we've been discussing UI with Tiphaine, is if having a portal and having your own UI and direct access to end users has ever been a temptation? Is it something that you have considered, or does it make sense?
Yeah, not really at this stage. We really focus on the kind of the piece of the value chain that is relatively lower level. We're really infrastructure. We don't really have a UI or a platform. However, we are enabling businesses that are building on top of our backend, and we're very happy with that. So either we have a B2B model and we help active financial investors and market participants to access data so that they can trade on the market, or we are actually enabling a couple of businesses on a B2B2C model, where actually some businesses are building a front end for customers. And we like that position because we are enabling key businesses out there, going from a custody business to like media. We're really different types of businesses, but we're not competing with any. And we really like this infrastructure position where we, a lot of people are using our data without even knowing that it's our data. And that's perfectly fine.
No, that makes lots of sense. Yeah. The next set of questions I have for both of you are again about diversity and inclusion in the fintech space. I wanted to ask you, as fintech leaders, what change, if any, have you introduced in your companies to drive more diversity? And maybe starting with you, Ambre, at this time.
So I like to talk about diversity not only through the kind of scope of women versus men. I think I value diversity a lot. I come from a family of 6 siblings, and we all have different backgrounds and different parents. So like I'm natively diverse in at core, and I think I like to see diversity as open-mindedness and not just about genders, but also about religion, about origins, about countries, food, diets, whatever. Like it's really about being accepting of the other and understanding what does this person brings to the table, and taking the best out of each without necessarily having that person to fit in your own schema, or so. And I'm sorry, I'm a bit dodging the bullet here with this answer. I know that we're here to celebrate also female-led companies, and that's brilliant. But at the company, if you remove core engineering, I have actually 50% women at the company, and it's not really something that I've been actively trying to do. It's just that I've had amazing women come my way, and that we've built the team with them, and they're brilliant. I'm super proud of each of them, but I'm equally proud of my male colleagues. Honestly, it's it's just. I think there's a lot of structural issues in tech, and that's also why by design there are probably less women. And I think imposing ratios and making this too much of a deal is not necessarily constructive, and that the best way to help solve this structural imbalance is through education. I just had a daughter 2 months ago, and she's absolutely lovely, and I just want to raise her in a world where she can be a CEO, and she can be a CEO in fintech if she wants to. But I don't think it should be something we enforce, rather something that comes organically.
Wow, congratulations. No, I think that's really interesting, and I love the fact that we look at this with a wider lens, so not only gender diversity, but diversity in a wider scale. And that's probably aligned also with what you were mentioning earlier about this kindness culture that you wanted to have within the company. Anything specific that you have done establish that maybe others listening to us today might reuse, or
I like what you said, the kindness culture. I just to be very clear, it goes with like work. Shit has to get done, right? I'm also. It's not just like roses and butterfly at work. Far from that. But indeed, there is a lot of. I don't know how to say, Tiphaine. Do you have a word for bienveillance in English? It's really about looking.
Kindness is.
But it's really about looking after each other, and. No, like I get my hands dirty very, very often in day-to-day stuff. Like there's nothing that is too good or too bad for anyone within the company, and call it a bit of a more maternal management style. It maybe, but at least it works. And I'm like, I think that even the guys are appreciative of that and they like it. I'm not competing with them. I'm not like a ego boss or whatever. I'm just trying to get things done in the most appropriate way. A lot of our team and colleagues have kids as well. Actually, half of the team, I believe, have kids. And so we really respect work-life balance. And I'm discovering the joys of parenthood. So I can only understand it more now. And I really hope that, generally speaking, leaders will, evolve towards a more kind and kind of protective type of management, assuming that shit gets done and that things are done properly. But it's independent of male, female. I think it's a lot of kind of old, how do you say that, archetypes, and that this is changing.
Oh, thank you. So everyone gets their hands dirty, including the CEO, and then another important point that I note from what you've just said is the importance of life-work balance, and for everyone within the company. So that's being family-friendly or personal life-friendly at work is definitely important. Anything to add to that, Tiphaine, or anything specific that you've done to have also an inclusive culture at Neuroprofiler?
We try always to focus on the skills and and not to take into account the nationalities and gender. So we spend a lot of time with my co-founder and our CPO to build a recruitment process with a lot of use cases to be sure that really we are not biased during the recruiting process and we focus only on skills. But we didn't implement really specific process to promote diversity, because for us really skills and personalities are most important, and then we are quite lucky because we use behavioral finance. Now we are launching a new product in sustainable finance, in financial education. So with these topics, naturally, we attract more women, more than in fintech generally, because, that's just how it is. We have more candidates, more female candidates, because that's topics that women in the financial sector, they like. We don't have specific policies to promote diversity, but we are just a diverse team because of the nature of, I think, our activities.
No, thank you. That's actually interesting to see that in both companies there's no specific quotas or specific objectives for diversity, but it's all happening quite naturally with the culture of the company. Are there any tips that you'd like to share to drive diversity in a fintech business? I know you've shared how things are working on your side. Anything else that you'd like to share there? Any advice or recommendation from you, Tiphaine, or?
For me, the main message would be, especially for potential female entrepreneur to really encourage them to launch and to create a company, because today I think it's that's my personal view. It's easier, I think, to build a fintech today if we are a woman than a man. And I can compare with my co-founder, for instance. He's never invited to conferences and events. I'm always invited because a lot of organizations today want to promote female entrepreneurs. So in terms of communications, of visibility, of support also from the government or for associations, we mentioned earlier the WILLA acceleration programs. There are much more opportunities when you are a female founder than a male founder. It's just easier. So if some of female potential founders are hesitating, my advice is just to do it because it's
that's interesting.
feasible.
Thanks a lot, Tiphaine. Anything to add to that,
No, I the only thing I would say is for female tentative founders to not hesitate and go for it. And what's the worst that can happen? I think shoot for the moon and get it is an important message. Like it's always worth a try, and if you try, often you succeed. So it's really there's been maybe a misconception that the fraud syndrome is true with kind of female entrepreneurs. Very often we discount ourselves a lot, and so it's good to not. So basically, it's hard to not, but sometimes it's good to just give it a try, and sometimes it just works out fine. So
yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot. Direct message to everyone, every woman watching us today, hesitating to start their startup, whether it is on the fintech space or elsewhere, is just to be ambitious, to go for it, and to trust your capabilities there, and shoot for the moon, as you said. As we getting closer to the end of the session, I wanted to ask you both to share with us what's coming next for you, what's on the horizon, whether for you or for your fintech, and maybe starting with you, Ambre.
So for us, I'm just starting to potentially we're going to close our Series A during the first half of 2021, and then we have a relatively heavy roadmap. One of the important milestones will be our Asian expansion also. So we are looking to expand starting with Singapore. So this will be, I guess, our next round of funding and our next wave of investment in the company and in people is going to be key in the next 6 to 9 months. That's something important.
Oh, thank you. In addition to what you mentioned earlier about the job openings at KAIKO as well. On that point, actually, as you mentioned Singapore and the Asian expansion, do you see specific traction on the Asian market for crypto? Is that what's driving your investment there?
Yeah, absolutely. Today, to be very honest, we have one French client out of over 100. So the market is mostly driven today by US investors. And if we look not just at the existing clients, but at our pipeline, it's also heavily geared towards the US. We believe there is a very large market in Asia, and that it's there's a complete lack of data solutions. So it's not like we're going to have to attack a large Asian competitor. It's mostly that there's no offering there. And we really want to position ourselves because we believe Asian investors have been really active for all things blockchain. They've historically been building their own tech instead of buying it. Also, because there was no real robust solution out there. So we definitely want to be there physically and capture this market and be more able to, first of all, from a time zone perspective, and also from a, being there, being seen there, building the brand out in Asia is really important. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So very exciting year for you. a growth, scaling up, international expansion, very exciting. And again, the job openings that will be announced later. So yeah, I'd encourage everyone to get in touch or to check your website if they'd like to learn more about it. Tiphaine, what's next for you and for Neuroprofiler?
So this year, the objective is to promote our 2 new products that I mentioned earlier. So the first one is our ESG profiler. So the objective is to assess the ESG preferences of clients, so their interest for sustainable finance through gamification and behavioral finance, and recommend them suitable products. And the second product is our Edu Profiler. So it's a financial education platform to help clients better understand financial products through gamification. So that's our 2 objectives for this year.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Actually, we didn't speak much about the product itself. But yeah, as you shared earlier, you've started more with a regulatory-driven product to assess risk profile of investors. And now we see 2 really interesting innovations that are all very high topics in the fintech space as well. On one hand, financial education, financial literacy, which is definitely one of the key topics. And by the way, it's one of the areas where we see lots of ideas come on the latest hackathon we have, as it's very important when it comes to financial inclusion, to have financial education, financial literacy. They go hand in hand. And the other very important topic as well, very timely, is ESG. So the importance of impact investing and having a positive impact with our financial investments. So yeah, good luck with both of these, both really exciting. And yeah, I guess we still have a couple of minutes before we close the session, just to see if we have any questions from the audience. I saw we had earlier, as we were discussing actually job openings at KAIKO, we had one question come up on YouTube, which is, what are the most important skills required in this field?
So I think an analytical brain is important, but also one thing that I personally value a lot, and knowing what I know on Tiphaine, I'm sure it's important to her too, is really curiosity. And intelligence without curiosity doesn't take you so far. I think it's really having a well-formed brain, but also a real willingness to learn and to get your head around things, especially true in my context in the crypto space, which changes every day. And so if you don't have the willingness to think through things and to learn about new things and to question yourself, it's going to be really hard to build something reliable, like something solid in the space. So I'm really all for, obviously, people that are well trained and educated and with good brains, but definitely the kindness and the curiosity angles, as I mentioned earlier, like super important.
Cool, thank you. That's all in terms of questions. So I'd like to thank you very much, both Ambre and Tiphaine, for joining us today. 2 very talented and inspiring fintech founders. Really excited, also exciting to hear from you about KAIKO and Neuroprofiler. I guess this is just the start of the conversation. So, and we can definitely spend hours and hours speaking about what you do, the innovations that you do, and what's also coming next in the fintech space from a diversity and inclusion perspective, and how we can improve there. What I'd like to do is thank everyone who's been watching us, and encourage all of you to reach out to all of us on LinkedIn to continue the discussion. Also, please go and check KAIKO and Neuroprofiler websites, especially for the KAIKO job openings that will be announced later today. Also, please check iwd.devpost.com for more information about the ongoing Hack to the Future hackathon, where we are looking to build an unbiased fintech future. Thank you all for watching. Thank you so much, Tiphaine, and really appreciate your time today and the great discussion we had.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.